Hello everyone, and what do you most enjoy about the Mass Effect series? The story, the characters, or the combat? In today's video I'm going over how a new blog post by Bioware may actually give us an early look into how Bioware may be approaching combat in the next game.
Lockhart QT.
Recently, Bioware have been giving us brand new developer insights into their next projects, being Dragon Age Dreadwolf and the next Mass Effect game, with a brand new community update that released yesterday, more focusing on Dragon Age. And this new community update also gave us a potential look into the next Mass Effect systems as well as Dragon Age, and development, as even though Dragon Age and Mass Effect are completely different series, Mass Effect and Dragon Age games are usually released a couple years apart, sharing assets, engines, systems and much more, and usually when the Dragon Age team finishes they actually move employees over to the next Mass Effect game, so we'll have that to look forward to as well. In the community update blog post that released yesterday, Bioware stated the following: past Dragon Age games have all handled RPG systems such as the player's progression differently, so naturally we're being just as experimental on Dragon Age Dreadwolf, taking the learnings of the past whilst also trying something new. Bioware also stated, skill trees are a fundamental part of a deep RPG experience and give our players the ability to customize how their character functions in combat. A key belief on the team is that when a player invests a skill point, it should have a clear, tangible effect on the game, such as an ability or impactful perk. So, as well as talking about skill points and combat and their new community update for Dragon Age Dreadwolf, Bioware also outlined key systems going into their future games. If you want to read the post in full, I'll put a link to it in the description for you all to read. It's an interesting read as it gives you an insight into how Bioware really developed games, both for Dragon Age and Mass Effect. However, this update, I do have to stress, was more about Dragon Age, but as I said before, we can use it to talk about how they will develop the next Mass Effect game. They also stated in the blog post that the developers at Bioware will actually be answering community questions on both Dreadwolf and the next Mass Effect game by using Twitter and the hashtag AskBioware. So if you want to ask Bioware any questions about Mass Effect or Dragon Age Dreadwolf, I'd suggest doing that. However, they did stress in the post that they're obviously not going to be answering any questions such as when's the trailer dropping, when's the reveal for both games dropping, any leaks, they're not going to be talking about that, they're just going to be talking about generic things. So if you want to ask Bioware a question, I'd suggest using that. By the way, for my next point, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but recently there was also a massive Dragon Age Dreadwolf gameplay leak, which shows off systems, characters, locations, but more importantly, actual gameplay of in-game combat. Now, Dragon Age has changed styles in recent games in the series, going from a more MMO approach to combat, for example in Origins, and then a more open world style in Inquisition. The same can be said about Mass Effect, however, with the more open world free combat in Andromeda, and then the more tight linear cover-based shooter combat in the OG Trilogy. Using this recent Dragon Age Dreadwolf leak, we can determine how Bioware might be changing up combat for the next two games. By the way, this will be slightly going over the leaks of Dreadwolf's gameplay. I've already done a more in-depth video on the topic, so if you want the leak in its entirety, the video is linked on screen now as well as in the description, so go ahead and watch that. But this will be your spoiler warning for any Dragon Age Dreadwolf leaks going forward. Ready? Okay. So in the Dragon Age Dreadwolf leak, we can actually see gameplay of Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and in it, arguably the most interesting tidbit from the leak concerns the combat system. Bioware appears to be dropping the ability to directly control any party members at all, focusing on the main player character, which has essentially been a franchise staple of Dragon Age since its inception. You've always been to directly control other party members and switch between. Instead, players will be giving characters orders like in Mass Effect, for example. From the recently leaked gameplay, we can also see that the inspiration clearly comes from 2018's God of War, and the leaker from Reddit states that this was intentional. This inspiration was apparently also confirmed by the leaker that this is how basically Bioware are thinking for games going forward in the series as well. The new combat in Dreadwolf seems to be a more simplified combat system focusing on player involvement and providing a more hack and slash feel to it. Now, the speculation starts here, as could the next Mass Effect game go down a similar route in terms of simplifying combat? As discussed previously, there have already been 2 different gameplay styles in the series. The OG Trilogy, which had a more linear combat system focusing on action and cover-based shooting, whereas Mass Effect 1 obviously focused more on RPGs, but whereas Mass Effect Andromeda was different, it tried to blend the more RPG elements of Mass Effect 1 with the exploration, with a more open sandbox bringing in jet boosters, jumping around, the nomad exploration, as well as sort of changing up combat systems on the fly and classes and abilities. In terms of the Dragon Age Dreadwolf leak, from what I've seen, the animations and combat looked really good, which gives me hope for both Dreadwolf as well as Mass Effect 4/5. As in my opinion, Andromeda's combat was actually really good, and it was probably the best part about that game. And if I'm being honest, I'd like to see that expanded upon with a next Mass Effect game, either being Mass Effect 4 or 5, whilst also bringing in some returning featuring gameplay elements from the OG Trilogy. Ideally, I'd like to see a blend of Mass Effect as a whole, by focusing on RPG elements from Mass Effect 1, for example, such as stats, character roles, character history, maybe race if they bring different races into it, and gear types. Games in the modern age have focused on loot, and I would like to see loot brought into Mass Effect. I think loot from missions would be a really key thing and would be really good to have. But I'd also like to see a return to a more open world sandbox, with more open levels and sort of more exploration such as jet boosters and etc. Imagine if somehow Bioware incorporated the sort of flying around elements in Anthem, but into the next Mass Effect game. Imagine if that was actually a thing. Personally, I don't think they'll do this, however, I think they'll go back to a more true to form OG Trilogy style, where it's a very linear cover-based shooter game, which is fine as well because I love the OG Trilogy. Mass Effect 2 is genuinely one of my favourite games of all time. I'd say it's in my top 5. I'd also like to see the return of commanding squad mates, as well as having characters that can swap out abilities on the fly, sort of like how Ryder was a jack of all trades in Mass Effect Andromeda, but bringing back the more cinematic set pieces from Mass Effect 2 and 3 as well. So everyone, that's been the video, and what do you guys think about the series going forward as a whole? Because the next game is going to be really interesting in terms of combat. But tell me in the comments below, would you prefer a combat style similar to the original Trilogy or Mass Effect Andromeda? Thank you so much for watching, and for more Dragon Age, Mass Effect, Destiny, whatever it may be content, consider subscribing and liking the video. Thank you so much for watching, goodbye everyone, and I'm really sorry about my voice as well. I've recently had a really bad cold, and I'm sort of on the peak out of it now, and my voice is completely gone, so that's probably why. I'm very nasally, so I apologise for that. But anyway, thank you so much for the recent love on the videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.